Absolutely. Here's a 500-word story based on the topic. When you grow old and find yourself alone, try practicing these things. The art of still living. When Harold turned 78, he stood in his living room surrounded by silence. No children's laughter, no rustle of another pair of footsteps. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 2 years prior. They'd never had children. And and though he'd once been the life of every poker night and Sunday brunch, time had a way of thinning crowds and quieting phones. For a while, he tried to ignore the ache of being alone. He watched television until the voices felt like company, but the commercials only reminded him of all the things he wasn't doing. One morning, he woke up and realized that time would pass whether he moved with it or not. So he stood, stretched his aching joints, and made a decision. If loneliness was going to be his companion, he might as well invite it to the table and show it how to live again. First, Harold practiced gratitude. Each morning, he wrote down 3 small things he was thankful for. At first, it felt forced. Warm coffee, a good pillow, sunshine through the blinds. But slowly, it changed the way he saw his days. He wasn't just surviving them anymore. He was noticing them. Second, he picked up an old hobby. Harold had once loved painting, but hadn't touched a brush since Margaret got sick. Now, with jazz playing low on the radio, he began painting again. Badly at first, but joyfully. The blank canvas didn't care about age, only expression. Third, he made it a goal to speak to someone every day. He started small. The cashier at the grocery store, the neighbor walking their dog. Eventually, he joined a local community center where they had a weekly chess club and a class on memoir writing. There, he met Marlene, who once ran a bakery and made the best lemon bars he'd ever tasted. Fourth, Harold began practicing kindness. He wrote letters to old friends, even those he hadn't seen in years. He volunteered to read to children at the library once a week. One day, a little boy asked if he had grandchildren. Harold simply smiled and said, "Not by blood, but maybe by heart." And finally, he allowed himself to rest without guilt, to sit with a cup of tea and simply be. To let the memories of Margaret drift through the quiet and smile instead of cry. He learned that being alone wasn't always the same as being lonely. So when others asked him how he managed, Harold would shrug and say, "You keep showing up for yourself, for others. Even when no one's knocking, you open the door. You never know who might walk through." He still missed Margaret. Of course he did, but he didn't feel hollow anymore. His days had color again. Because even in solitude, Harold had chosen to keep living, learning, connecting. And in that, he found a new kind of peace. Let me know if you'd like a short part of this turned into an audio clip. Absolutely. Here's a 500-word continuation of the story about Harold, further exploring how he continues to grow and thrive while navigating life alone. Spring returned with the kind of quiet beauty that Harold had learned to appreciate more in recent years. The trees outside his window burst into bloom, and with them, something inside him seemed to open too. He had found a rhythm now, one not dictated by others, but crafted by his own small daily choices. One morning, while sipping his tea and looking out at the cherry blossoms, Harold realized he had stopped checking the clock so much. The anxiety that used to accompany long, empty afternoons had been replaced by a sense of presence. His time was his own now, and he had filled it with things that mattered. One of those things was journaling. Harold had begun writing down memories, not only to preserve them, but to process them. He wrote about the way Margaret used to hum when she baked, how his father taught him to fish, and the thrill of buying his first car. At first, the memories came out jagged, some joyful, some painful, but they slowly shaped themselves into a mosaic of a life well lived. Writing gave him the sense that his story still mattered, even if there was no one left to tell it to out loud. Then came an unexpected letter, handwritten, with a return address he didn't recognize. It was from a man named Daniel, the grandson of Harold's wartime friend. Daniel had found an old photo in his grandfather's belongings. Two young men in uniform, arms slung over each other's shoulders, smiling into the sun. "I just wanted to say thank you," Daniel wrote. "Granddad spoke of you often, said you saved his life more than once." Harold sat quietly with the letter in his lap, a lump in his throat. That one photograph had outlived decades and delivered connection across generations. It reminded him that even the smallest parts of our lives could ripple far beyond what we ever see. This spark of connection inspired Harold to start a new project. With the help of Marlene from the community center, he began recording short videos telling stories from his life. Tales from the war, memories of childhood mischief, reflections on love and loss. They uploaded them to a YouTube channel, thinking maybe a few folks might find it interesting. Within weeks, comments began rolling in. Young people asked questions about history. Others thanked him for sharing things they never learned in school. One woman wrote, "Your stories remind me of my grandfather. He passed last year, and hearing you speak brings me comfort." Harold had never imagined his words could travel the world. And yet, in a small corner of the internet, he had built a bridge, one story at a time. In all the things Harold practiced, gratitude, creativity, connection, kindness, reflection, he discovered that growing old wasn't about fading. It was about evolving. And though he may have started alone, he had woven himself back into the fabric of life, proving that meaning doesn't retire. It just shifts and waits to be rediscovered. Would you like a piece of this story turned into a voice clip? I can help with that. Just let me know which part. Of course. Here's another 200-word paragraph to continue and gently bring more heart to Harold's journey. One rainy afternoon, as Harold sat by the window watching droplets trace paths down the glass, he felt a deep calm. The house was quiet, but not empty. It echoed with the memories he had welcomed back into his life and the new voices he had found along the way. He reached for the photo album on the coffee table and flipped through pages worn soft with time. Beside each photo, he had begun writing little notes, names, dates, thoughts, so that if someone came across them after he was gone, they'd know the stories, not just the faces. That thought no longer made him sad. In fact, it gave him a sense of peace. He had lived fully, twice even, once in the moment and again in the telling of it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest way to overcome being alone, to create a life so meaningful that your presence lingers, not an echo, but an inspiration. With a small smile, Harold picked up his pen and turned to a fresh page in his journal. "Dear tomorrow," he wrote, "I'm still here, still learning, still living. Let's see what you've got." Let me know if you'd like any part of this voiced.